Yo friends, I'm out in the garden and plant nursery. I want to talk to you really quick about how I'm growing a ton of pawpaw this year, North America's largest native fruit, growing it from seed. This is a bed of tiny baby pawpaw seedlings. It is the last day in July here, and pawpaw always seems to stress me out because some of it comes up really early, looking really big like this, and some of them are still just starting to wake up now. It's just surprising to me how late they hold on here. Here's another bed with hazelnuts and then pawpaws here on the western side. I think one of the reasons pawpaws wake up late is just because they really like the shade, especially when they're young. But even though they're waking up late, and even though they're going to be kind of shaded, they'll still put on an impressive amount of growth. Let me show you. I expect those pawpaws to probably be about this size, maybe a little smaller, by the time they're done growing from seed here their first year. Some might even be bigger. I'm still testing out some stuff and still, some might even be bigger. We'll see. Here's another bed here. Some sporadic germination, I think, unless a lot of them are waking up even later than this. But over here, and maybe it's just because it's shaded, I'm not sure, a lot of really great thick germination here. This one too has a lot of great germination on the western side of these chestnuts. Again, this is shaded, so maybe that's one of the reasons these are doing so well here. Either way, a little sporadic germination, not a big problem for me because I just planted so many seeds. It's pretty easy to collect and harvest and plant the seeds, and so I can just do a lot of excess, and then even if only half of them sprout, I'm still way in the black here. So let's talk about what I did really quick here. I found these pawpaws both in the wild and from orchard variety pawpaw trees, and I collected them and ate from them, enjoyed them in the fall. I have a video that I'll post or link to here where I took the seeds from the pawpaws essentially by just kind of dumping everything in a blender and blending it, really pulsing it really gently as best as I could, and that broke the gelatinous material from the seeds and it made the seeds easy to pop out. Pawpaws, like a lot of other native stuff here and a lot of other plants, need to go through a period of cold stratification. So they want to be in soil. I made sure to keep these seeds moist the whole time. So even as I was processing them and I pulled them out, I put them in a bowl with a little bit of water or a moist newspaper or paper towel. And then I packed them in moist sand. You don't want it to be like dripping wet. You want it to be just enough you can kind of bunch up and make a ball, so moist sand. And then I put that baggie of moist sand with seeds in my fridge for the whole winter. You could also totally just do this outside. You want to make sure to protect it from birds and squirrels and such. I have heard online that squirrels don't bother pawpaw seeds, and yet I've seen evidence for myself of the exact opposite. So maybe my squirrels are different than yours, but just be wary that stuff might get into your seeds. I was checking on these seeds somewhat regularly throughout the winter for any signs of mold, and if there was mold, I kind of just aerated it, mixed things around a little bit. But in the winter, in the spring, when things started to wake up, I brought them out here to my air-prune beds and I planted them. Now, these are air-prune beds. They're a raised garden bed. I have some videos on my channel here. The idea here is that instead of a solid bottom, there's actually like a half-inch or a quarter-inch mesh on the bottom. Ideally, actually, I would prop these up on cinder blocks so that way the mesh doesn't bend and touch the soil. I just didn't have enough cinder blocks and didn't get around to it this year. Next year, though. Pawpaws like these beds because they have a long taproot, and as that long taproot hits the mesh and then hits air, because there's a layer of air, ideally, between the bottom of the bed and the earth, when it hits that air, it self-prunes, air pruning bed. And so instead of burying this long taproot down, it has a smaller taproot and it starts to spread out, kind of runners to the side. Now, I found with these taller beds, sometimes the pawpaw taproot doesn't even hit the bottom or just barely starts to hit the bottom, which is pretty cool too. I think that's ideal. I think maintaining that taproot is what the plant wants to do, and it's probably the best for it overall. But if you're planting these in the ground and you want to transplant them, digging them up without harming that taproot can be really difficult. And so kind of having them in a system like this allows you to still grow them well and dig them up in the fall without harming them. In these beds is just leaf mold, leaf compost. rather, I got from you know, the local township, and then I planted the seeds, you know, just a little bit deep, and then covered with a thin layer of mulch to help maintain moisture. I then just sat around and waited for a couple months for everything to sprout. And yeah, like I said, they're starting to sprout. In the fall, when the leaves on these plants turn yellow and start to fall off, I'll know that they have kind of stored their energy in the bottom of the plant. And then I'll be able to pull them carefully out of the bed and make sure to keep the roots of the plants moist, so either in water for a few hours as I'm processing and working here, but ideally I'm going to bury the plants, the bottom of the plants, the roots, in a big mound of wood chips and leave the tops sticking above the ground. That's what will allow me to store these in a big pile all the way through winter, and so I can sell them as long as that wood chip pile is not frozen solid. You know, I can dig them out and sell them in the, you know, the early winter and the early spring. And you also could dig them right out of the bed like this and plant them directly where you want them to grow. Growing from seed directly in the ground where you want them to grow is a great option too. I think I would still cold stratify in my fridge and then plant the seeds in the ground. Maybe even put a little cage around it just to make sure nothing gets in and bothers it until it starts to sprout a few months later. All that to be said, if you're interested in buying some wild pawpaws or some pawpaws grown from name variety, orchard variety seeds, hit me up in the fall or the early spring. These bare root plants without any soil around the roots and no leaves on top, so they're in dormancy. As long as those roots are kept moist, these bare root plants I can ship all over the East Coast, and you can plant them directly in the ground even in the fall, and it kind of gives them all winter to get used to that area, and they'll be ready to go. They won't even almost notice they've moved come spring. You can also plant them in the spring, and it's just as good for them. I think it's a really healthy way to transplant these. It's a little better for them, a little less stressful for them than growing them in a pot, digging them out of the pot when their leaves are on and they're growing actively, and transplanting them. Now, if you didn't want to go through all the process of building a big air-prune bed to grow just a handful of pawpaws, I would also check out these tree pots like this. Now, ideally there'll be ones with a gap here at the bottom, so as the taproot hits that gap, it self-prunes. Now, I don't want to leave it in these pots very long. This one needs to come out here this year and be planted in the ground. But yeah, this is another great way of growing it in the pots, and then they can be, here's one, its roots are sticking out, but it's finding air, so I think those roots are going to self-prune if they haven't already. And so you can transplant these pots directly in the soil. You can do it when the leaves are on, but I think it is less stressful to do it in the fall or in the early spring. Thanks for following along. Happy growing, friends.